I think that the political groups haven't finished yet. That's why we have this delay. Sorry for this delay. Dear Secretary General, dear Deputy Secretary General, Secretary General of the Assembly, ambassadors, members of the Assembly, dear colleagues, as I stand before you, you can see in front of me the original text of the European Convention on Human Rights. It is not simply a document on display, it is the very compass that has guided Europe for 75 years toward law, democracy, and dignity. And just a few steps away, in the foyer outside this chamber, you will find another treasure later, a 13th century manuscript of Ptolemy's geography from the Vatopedi Monastery on Mount Athos, a book first written in the 2nd century, nearly 1,800 years ago. This genuine Athonite codex that we are privileged to host for the next few days has a sister volume in the Marchiana Biblioteca in Venice. Tradition holds that Renaissance navigators, Columbus among them, drew on Ptolemaic coordinates as they prepared their bold crossings. Two texts, dear colleagues, side by side for the first time and in conversation across the centuries. Why? Because each, in its own way, is about borders. The Convention draws the human boundaries that must never be crossed. The inviolable line against torture and slavery, the line that guards liberty and security, the sacred space of thought, conscience, and religion, the open horizon of expression and of peaceful assembly and association. These are the protective borders of human dignity, the lines we draw not to divide people, but to defend the person. Ptolemy, by contrast, mapped the geographical borders, mountains and rivers, capes and seas, the lines that separate polities and shape their destinies. Ptolemy's geography reflected the limits of the knowledge of his time. By moving beyond such imagined borders, humanity learned to envision not only a larger world, but also another world of rights founded on the equal dignity of all human beings. As the journalist and historian Tim Marshall has reminded us, geography still exerts its quiet pressure on politics. Mountains, steppes, and straits can predispose nations toward rivalry or restraint. But our task here, dear colleagues, is to prove that we are not prisoners of geography, that institutions, law, and dialogue can soften the hard edges of terrain. Those who drafted the Convention understood this deeply. They set limits so that freedom might flourish within them. In John Donne's enduring words, "No man is an island," any man's death diminishes me. In our European key, we might add, when even a small piece of land is washed away by the sea, the whole continent is made smaller. Just as when one nation suffers, all Europe is diminished. There is also a warning that reaches us from philosophy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote of the first man who, having enclosed a piece of ground, said, "This is mine," and called him the founder of civil society for good and for ill. That moment of enclosure created order and property, but also the temptation to forget the common good. The Convention answers that temptation. It regrounds possession in personhood, sovereignty in responsibility, power in rights. And so these two manuscripts, one of law, one of maps, engage in a conversation across the centuries. The Convention marks the borders of what we must not be done to a human being. Ptolemy marks the borders of where we are. Between the two lies the work of statesmanship, to ensure that the lines on map never erase the lines of conscience. Dear colleagues, I look out at the benches before me and I see colleagues from countries that have not always enjoyed easy relations. Nations that in other centuries met on battlefields now sit shoulder to shoulder. This assembly binds them like the pages of Ptolemy's Codex bound tightly together for centuries. If parchment can hold together through time, surely parliaments can hold together through debate. Nearly 30 years ago, when I was working as a journalist, I first entered Mount Athos to report on a treasure the same one Ptolemy's code we saw today. The Athonite community, founded and inhabited exclusively by Orthodox monks since 963, more than 1,000 years, preserves not only relics of faith, but also records of science and art. From the cells of Athos to the benches of this chamber runs a single thread. Europe safeguards memory not as a relic of the past, but as the very condition for freedom in the present and the future. This is why today the original convention stands within this hall, because our politics must be measured against it. And why, just beyond these doors, Ptolemy's geography stands watch, a reminder that the world we govern is not abstract, but physical. Mountains, valleys, rivers, lines on the map. We cannot redraw the mountains, but we can redraw the meaning of their borders. Let me end with a lesson I hope we will carry away. The Convention teaches that the true borders of Europe are ethical, the limits we set to protect the person. Ptolemy teaches that the visible borders of Europe are geographical, the lines on the map that once divided us. If we are faithful to the first, the second need not be our fate. May these two books, so different, so near, remind us that law can humanize space and that maps, when read with wisdom, can point not only to where we are, but to who we must become. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I would like to invite all of you for a minute of silence to remember a long-standing and extremely vocal member of our Assembly from Switzerland and ALDE, Alfred Herr, who passed away 10 days ago. Thank you. Dear colleagues, before I move to our first item, I remind the Assembly that members who have not submitted an annual declaration of interest are required to start any intervention with an oral declaration of interest under paragraph 20 of the Code of Conduct for members of the Parliamentary Assembly. I also remind members that in order to be registered for the sitting, you should insert your badge when you take your seat and keep it inserted for at least 30 seconds. The first item on the agenda is the examination of credentials of new members. The names of the members as substitutes are in document number 16265. If no credentials are challenged, the credentials will be ratified. Are any credentials challenged? The credentials are ratified. I welcome our new colleagues. The next item on the agenda is the election of a Vice President of the Assembly in respect of Albania. The candidate is Mrs. Olta Tsaksa. If there is no request for a vote, she will be declared elected. So she is elected. I congratulate Olta. Our next business is to consider the changes proposed in the membership of committees. These are set out in Document Commission 2025-06 plus Addendum 1. Are the proposed changes in the membership of the Assembly's committee agreed? Agreed. I'm going on now with a request for current affairs debate or debate under urgent procedure. Before we examine the draft agenda, the Assembly needs to consider a request for debates under the urgent and current affairs procedures. The Bureau has received the following request. First, current affairs debate requested by the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe political group under the title Political Crisis in Serbia. Second, urgent procedure debate requested by the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media under the title Reporting from Gaza, an urgent call to protect the lives of journalists and support their work. Third, urgent procedure debate in the framework of the Assembly opinion requested by the Committee of Ministers under the title Draft Convention Establishing an International Claims Commission for Ukraine. Fourth, urgent procedure debate requested by Mr. Max Lux, Germany Socialist, supported by 24 members of the Assembly under the title Democracy, Rule of Law and Inclusive Dialogue in Turkey. Fifth, current affairs debate requested by political groups under the title Russia, New Threats to European Democracies. Sixth, debate under urgent procedure requested by Mr. Christophe Lacroix, Belgium Socialist, supported by 23 members of the Assembly under the title Israel's Deliberate Attacks on the Global Sumud, Humanitarian Flotilla, en route to Gaza. 7. Debate under urgent procedure requested by political groups under the title Urgent Call to Put an End to the Devastating Humanitarian Catastrophe in Gaza. 8. Debate under urgent procedure requested by the European People's Party political group under the title Uphold Democracy and the Rule of Law in Georgia. And 9th, debate under urgent procedure requested by the Socialist Democrats and Green political group under the title Urgent Call to Put an End to the Devastating Humanitarian Catastrophe in Gaza and the Killing of Journalists in Gaza. At its meeting this morning, the Bureau decided to recommend to the Assembly to hold 4 urgent procedure debates on draft convention establishing an international claims commission for Ukraine, Russia, new threats to European democracies, urgent call to put an end to the devastating humanitarian catastrophe and the killings of journalists in Gaza, and uphold democracy and the rule of law in Georgia, and 2 current affairs debates on political crisis in Serbia and democracy, rule of law and inclusive dialogue in Turkey, during this part session. Is that agreed, dear colleagues? Agreed, thank you. The next item of business is the adoption of the agenda for the 4th part of the 2025 ordinary session. The draft agenda submitted for the Assembly's approval was brought up to date and adopted by the Bureau this morning. I remind you that we have just agreed the urgent procedure debate and current affairs debate set out in the draft before you. To allow more members to participate in this very busy part session, I have decided to reduce speaking times in debates throughout this part session to 2 minutes. I'm sorry for that, but we wouldn't have time in another way, of the usual 3 minutes from tomorrow onwards. Is the draft agenda as amended agreed to? It is agreed. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the debate on the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee, document 16257, with addenda 1 and 2. The progress report will be presented by Mr. Zsolt Nemet, the leader of the European Conservatives, and he's here. With this, we will consider the report by the ad hoc committee of the Bureau on observation of the presidential election in Poland, 18 May and the 1st of June 2025. The report on election observation will be presented by Mr. Julian Bulay, the leader of ALDE. We will suspend this item at 12:30 p.m. to enable the prize award ceremony for the Vaclav Havel Human Rights. The debate will then continue at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon. I now call Mr. Zsolt Nemet to present the progress report. Dear Zsolt, you have the floor for 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate.
Secretary General, I would like to welcome very honorable guests in the chamber, there are guests from Greece, from Mount Athos with us. Father Ephraim from Vatopedi Monastery and Father Elias from Simona Petra Monastery. We have been very much honored on the invitation of our president, Theodoros Rossopoulos, to visit Mount Athos with the colleagues of the Presidential Committee. And we have experienced, among a lot of things, living faith. We have experienced that Christianity in the Mount Athos is not history, but it is a reality targeting towards the future. And that faith reflects and generates important values for our social existence as well, and our values drive us towards political action. I am very grateful to you, President, for organizing this trip and also for the exhibition, which will open at 1 o'clock. Welcome, fathers from Mount Athos. Secondly, colleagues, I would like to underline and draw your attention that this week we will talk a lot about journalists. Journalists in the context of the Václav Havel Prize. I am very glad to see that 3 candidates have been for the Václav Havel Prize from this background. And I am also very glad that many other topics relate to the hardships journalists confront with. At this point, I would like to mention the brutality how Charlie Kirk was murdered in the United States. Journalists, influencers are our voice, and we need to protect them to be able to say what they think for our societies. The Parliamentary Assembly plays a very important role in election observation. We had the Moldovan elections, and we had an exercise in this case. We had a successful election in Moldova, and hopefully the observation of out-of-country vote will be also a positive experiment. I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. Blanchatra. Lord Blanchatra was initiating the revision of our observation activity, and now we had the first opportunity. Probably it is just the beginning, but I think it is important to draw the conclusions how the election observation in Moldova was happening. Also, the Parliamentary Assembly plays a very important role in the election of judges. As you are aware, the Hungarian list has been rejected, and there has been some voices on political groups as well, challenging this decision. I would like to draw your attention, colleagues, that the advisory panel of the Committee of Ministers, headed by the Spanish former member and former ambassador, did not raise any concern concerning neither the candidates nor the procedure. Still, the Judges Committee has rejected this list. I wouldn't like to see the over-politicization of the activity of the committee, of the Judges Committee, and I think we should pay attention to this question and to the position of the Hungarian government in this respect, which is available to all of you. The summer has been broadly defined and influenced by important geopolitical steps and developments. I would draw your attention that we had a NATO summit in Hague, which was a successful exercise. We had also the Alaska summit, which we don't know how far will take us. We also had the Shanghai Cooperation Council, and we are going to have the Asia-Pacific summit coming up soon between the leaders of the United States and China. All these developments were not necessarily able to influence strengthening diplomacy where it should have, especially the brutal Russian aggression against the Ukraine is still going on, and similarly, the tension in the Middle East has substantially grown, and it is not an accident that on our agenda this week we will have both Russia, the Ukrainian question, and also the Gaza and the Middle East situation. We will discuss these questions and hope that diplomacy will take over the role of violence and the role of aggression. There have been some positive developments in the past couple of months as well. Especially I would like to mention under this the Azeri-Armenian agreement, which has been brokered by the United States. Hopefully, the open questions, because there are open questions, we are all aware that there are open questions in this relationship as well, will be solved in this new climate, and for that reason I am very glad that we will be able to welcome the Armenian Prime Minister in our circles. And I also hope that the more intensive diplomatic activity of Azerbaijan, our Secretary General's meeting with the Azeri President in New York at the General Assembly, will contribute to the solution of the so-called Azerbaijan question in the Council of Europe. And we will find a way how we will be able to see again our Azeri colleagues back in the Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, dear Zsolt. With this, we will consider the report by the ad hoc committee of the Bureau on Observation of the presidential election in Poland. The report on election observation will be presented by the leader of ALDE, Mr. Julian Boulay. Julian, you have the floor.
Thank you, President, Secretary General, former presidents of this Assembly, dear ambassadors, representatives of the Russian forces in exile, dear Vladimir Karamurza, dear abbots, Father Ephraim, Father Elias from Vatopedi, and Simona Petras, all of you. It's been an honor of chairing the PACE delegation that observed Poland's presidential election on 18th of May and 1st of June 2025. We paid a pre-electoral visit in May. During the 2 rounds of elections, observers of our 31-member delegation visited over 180 polling stations. This coverage gave the delegation a broad overview of the electoral process across urban and rural Poland. I thank the Polish authorities and the chair of the Polish delegation, Madam Pomaska, for their invitation and smooth cooperation. I also wish to thank my colleague, Lilian Tanguy, for leading the delegation during the first round, as I was present in Romania during our presidential election, the monitoring rapporteurs for their precious input, and the Venice Commission for its individual legal support. Our Assembly was the only international parliamentary organization observing these elections alongside a limited ODIHR mission headed by our dear Dunia Mijatovic, whom we had excellent cooperation with. Dear colleagues, Poland's 2025 election again unfolded deep political polarization and unresolved institutional disputes. The rule of law crisis ongoing since 2015, when peace reshaped the judiciary, including the Constitutional Tribunal and Supreme Court, still means there is no fully credible, independent mechanism to resolve electoral disputes domestically. The campaign was also marked by disinformation and foreign interference, much of it linked by Polish institutions to Russian sources. The Polish authorities deployed significant resources to counter disinformation, cyber attacks, and coordinated campaigns from abroad, notably from Russia and Belarus. However, weak institutional coordination reduced the effectiveness and countermeasures, and hybrid and cyber threats further undermined public trust. Social networks emerged as decisive tools for voter outreach. Online campaigning, however, was accompanied by disinformation, including third-party paid advertisements of unclear origin. This vulnerability cannot be underestimated. Against this backdrop, the election day was calm and professional. Our delegation concluded that the election was competitive, well managed, and offered voters a genuine choice. The very high turnout confirmed the strong democratic commitment of Polish citizens. Yet, long-standing political polarization, biased media coverage, misuse of official resources, limited campaign finance transparency, and persistent concerns about judicial independence undermined overall confidence in the process. Our delegation formulated clear recommendations for the Polish authorities, including improving vote secrecy to protect voters from undue pressure, reforming the process for validating results, removing it from bodies found illegitimate by European Court of Human Rights, implementing European Court of Human Rights judgments to restore judicial independence, including on Supreme Court chambers and Constitutional Tribunal appointments, depoliticizing the National Electoral Commission and reforming the National Broadcasting Council for impartiality and accountability, combating foreign interference through full implementation of the EU Digital Services Act, improved platform cooperation and stronger enforcement, enhancing transparency in campaign finance through real-time reporting of income and expenditures and sanctions on illegal third-party campaigning, ensuring inclusive elections by improving accessibility for persons with disabilities, removing voting restrictions for persons with intellectual or psychosocial disabilities, promoting gender balance in electoral bodies, and supporting citizen observation in line with international standards. Dear all, the runoff was decided by a razor-thin margin. Peace-backed candidate Karol Nawrocki won with 50.89%, a difference of fewer than 370,000 votes out of nearly 21 million. Turnout reached 71.63% with record participation abroad, over 84%, where the candidate of the civic platform, Rafał Trzaskowski, won nearly two-thirds of the vote. The results reflect Poland's two-camp politics, giving the president-elect a narrow but clear mandate. Karol Nawrocki's victory marks not just a close result, but a turning point. Poland's politics will remain polarized, institutional standoffs and constitutional disputes are likely to continue. Nonetheless, consensus endures the key foreign policy challenges. In conclusion, I congratulate the Polish people for their commitment to democracy and exceptionally high turnout. And despite polarization, this election confirms Poland's democratic resilience and peaceful transfer of power. The civic commitment now calls on political leaders to engage in inclusive dialogue, bridge divisions, and strengthen trust in institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Dear colleagues, we will now hear speeches from the speakers on behalf of the political groups. I remind members that speaking time only for today is 3 minutes. As for tomorrow, it will be for 2 minutes. And I call first Petra Bayer on behalf of the Socialists, Greens and Democrats. Petra.
Thank you, Theodoros. Dear colleagues, allow me to address you not only as a speaker on behalf of my group, but also as the chair of the Judges Committee. You all know that originally at the agenda there was foreseen a voting on a judge in respect of Cyprus tomorrow, which disappeared from the agenda. I first want to explain why it was so. We heard in our September session the 3 candidates, and then we had a debate, and we suggested that Mrs. Margarita Papantonio is the most qualified. Then after we published this result, one of the other 2 candidates withdraw from the list. But this is our obligation in accordance with the rules and in accordance with all the things we are following, that we have to present you 3 good qualified candidates, and we only have 2 left over. There can't be an election tomorrow, and that's the reason why we postponed that. So what will happen now? We hope that Cyprus will bring us a new list soon, and that we can continue in January. And I also will make a recommendation in my ongoing report on the election of judges that we limit this phase to withdraw, because otherwise every not successful candidate ever could avoid to have a new judge elected. And the second case on Hungary, Scholt already mentioned and told you what was going on. We discussed very extensively in our committee the Hungarian list, but we do not only look at the list, we also look at the procedure before. And if we are not happy with the procedure, then it can be that we do not hear the candidates at all, and in this case it happens, because it's our responsibility to also look at this. There is the requirement that the national selection procedure must satisfy the minimum requirements of fairness and transparency. And that is also in line with, on the one hand, our own resolutions and decisions, but also with a guideline of the Committee of Ministers. And these foresee a balanced composition of the national selection body, and also that we can assume that the members of this selection body at the national level is free from undue influence. And in this case, 3/4 of the committee members were in the opinion that that was not the case. And so the procedure was rejected. And I think that it's not a politicization of the committee. And we also do not always follow what the advisory panel tells us. This was a decision, and we have to speak about it later on in case there is a request for a rejection of the progress report on this behalf.
Thank you. On behalf of the European People's Party, Christophe Bricot. Christophe, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Beaucoup de choses ont été dites, donc je vais essayer de faire court. Depuis la dernière fois que nous nous sommes vus ici, c'était à l'occasion notamment de la signature de l'accord créant un tribunal spécial contre le crime d'agression contre l'Ukraine, qui vient compléter avec le registre des dommages un travail de longue date et qui continue, et c'est heureux. Personnellement, je suis fier d'avoir participé et de continuer à participer à ça. Je voulais saluer le rapport de M. Boulay sur les élections en Pologne, qui démontre que le processus électoral s'est globalement bien passé, même si dans un environnement politique extrêmement polarisé et qui subit des influences diverses, et en particulier de la Fédération de Russie. Et enfin, un petit mot sur l'inflation des débats urgents qui sont soumis à notre réflexion et à nos débats et à nos discussions, qui permettent assez difficilement de s'y préparer. C'est un peu dommage parfois. Donc peut-être que dans les règles sur lesquelles nous travaillons régulièrement, il y a une façon de mieux anticiper cela. Voilà, ce serait peut-être juste un petit mot. Et enfin, pour compléter les propos de Madame Bahir, il y a un processus que nous avons mis en place pour la sélection des juges, processus qui est assez complet puisqu'il implique à la fois les gouvernements, un panel d'experts, une commission dédiée, puis le vote de l'ensemble des parlementaires. Je crois que nous devons faire confiance au processus et éviter de le questionner à chaque fois que les décisions qu'il prend nous déplaisent. Et je ne crois pas que ce soit une question politique. Je suis d'accord. Merci.
Thank you, dear Christophe. Trust the Secretariat and, of course, the colleagues, if they speak as you did, that we are going to have time for all these issues to have to deal with. Now, on behalf of the European Conservatives, Patriots and Affiliates, Elisabetta Gardini. Elisabetta, you have the floor.
Grazie, signor Presidente, cari colleghi. Allora, prima di tutto, permettetemi di ringraziare Nemeth Zsolt, non solo per il lavoro sempre eccellente che svolge, ma anche per ricordare l'anniversario della sua elezione a Presidente del nostro gruppo. Vorrei anche ringraziare lei, Presidente, e tutta l'Assemblea per questo minuto di silenzio dedicato al collega Alfred Herr. Tutti quanti lo ricordiamo come un amico, come una persona che si è sempre impegnata politicamente in Svizzera, così come anche nella nostra casa a Strasburgo. Lui apparteneva a questa casa dal 2011, quindi ha lavorato tanto qui. E mi piace anche vedere come tutti lo abbiano ricordato, non solo politicamente, ma anche dal punto di vista umano. Tutti hanno ricordato il suo carattere diretto, indipendente, schietto, anche il suo senso dell'umorismo, e così lo vogliamo ricordare tutti quanti. Mi permetta anche di unirmi a quanto detto il Presidente Zolt, perché in questi mesi sono accadute tante cose. Una ha sconvolto veramente il mondo ed è stata l'uccisione del giovane americano Charlie Kirk, e la cosa ha suscitato un grande scalpore. Io credo che quello che è accaduto, questa violenza brutale, perché come ha ricordato anche lei oggi, Presidente, nessuno deve morire per le sue idee, anche se quelle idee possiamo non condividerle affatto o condividerle, questo non cambia assolutamente. Credo che, siccome nella Commissione Politica stiamo lavorando proprio a un documento sulla violenza contro i politici, che potrà offrire spunti quanto è accaduto al giovane Kirk, ma anche le reazioni che si sono succedute dopo, perché l'empatia non può essere a corrente alterna. E mi permetta, sono tante le cose di cui potremmo parlare, ma di soffermarmi su quanto ha detto la collega Petra Bayer. Io non sono affatto d'accordo, non ha portato un fatto concreto, ha portato delle opinioni politiche, e il fatto che lo dimostra è che il Comitato dei Ministri, che ha un panel di consiglieri che ha valutato sia la procedura che ha ritenuto corretta, sia anche i curriculum, che sono curriculum di altissimo livello, che rispettano le caratteristiche che vengono richieste per i giudici, e questo io credo possa essere un vulnus. Non vorremmo vedere una corte con delle sedie vacanti, o che ci potessero essere dei giudizi politici. Detto questo, diciamo che dal giugno del 2025 abbiamo visto che questo mondo non è diventato più sicuro, sappiamo che ci sono 55 guerre che continuano ad affliggere l'umanità, con escalation e nuovi conflitti. Ecco, io vorrei fare un invito, perché noi non abbiamo bisogno di tifoserie, e qualche volta anche noi ci caschiamo invece. Non abbiamo bisogno di tifosi, ma di equilibrio e di buona volontà. Penso che possiamo trasformare le divisioni in un impegno comune al servizio della democrazia, solo se sappiamo mantenere la barra dritta. Grazie a tutti.
Thank you so much, dear Elisabetta. I fully agree with what you have said about the violence against politicians. I just want to remind you, colleagues, that after my proposal last March, we had this issue as a main issue to be discussed among the 60 speakers of the parliaments and members of our council or observers, and it was really the most important to be discussed. So I believe that maybe Elisabetta's proposal should be thoroughly discussed in the relevant committees, and we may need to do more on that. Now I will give the floor to Yevgenia Kravchuk on behalf of ALDE. Yevgenia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank both of the rapporteurs for their tremendous work over these months. Although it was summer, it was very intense, and you see how changed the world, how fast the world is changing around, and we have to keep up. And I would like to thank, actually, to bring all of these important topics to the debates this week, because we cannot just be silent or pretend that drones are not flying over your countries right now, not only in Ukraine. And there is a direct threat to democracy. There is hybrid attacks to your countries. And, you know, there are bad things, but also there are some very good things. And as Julian Bula mentioned, that despite the polarization in Polish society, Russians were not successful to actually interfere into the elections. And I would like to congratulate us all was the results on Moldovan elections, because Russians, again, put in billions of dollars and euro into buying votes in Moldova and trying to threaten citizens and actually pro-European parties were not successful. And what does it prove? It proves that if you are not afraid, then you can tackle the problems. You have to have a plan. We have to be united, and all of these threats from autocrats and different regimes can be, just fought back, and that's what we have to do in our respectful home countries. But also, I cannot not mention the backsliding in different member states, and we will be talking also about the youth movements this session. And the young people are protesting on the streets. They're protesting in Serbia. They're still protesting in Georgia. And we will be having debates on these countries as well. But also, we need to ensure that if there are violations of human rights, there are violations of international law, the justice will come. So I would like, on behalf of ALDE, of course, to welcome also the debates on the convention, the draft convention on the Claims Commission, which is the second element of the comprehensive mechanism to be able to actually help and bring justice to all of those millions of people in Ukraine that were hurt by Russian aggression. So we have a very plenty events during this week, and I would like to ask this assembly to be united, and we need our democracy alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Yevgenia. And now, on behalf of the United European Left, I call Laura Castel, the co-chair of the party group.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, my political group, we confirm that in this assembly, the agenda more and more is monopolized by geopolitical motivated issues, especially after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We see in cases such as Serbia, Georgia, or Moldova. Colleagues, we should avoid double standards, and we should be consistent in how we react in backslidings in each case. This is to say, for instance, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Georgia. There is no consistency in the reactions from this assembly. For example, Turkey, since 2016, the situations regarding human rights are not improving. On the contrary. Or Georgia, there is an anomaly of having representation in the Committee of Ministers, but the colleagues of the Georgian parliament are not present here, and etc. We have to remind that we, as an organization, we could trigger the joint procedure as a way to help and respond to the backslidings. But instead, sometimes we request, depending on the member states, impossible conditions to meet, as in Georgia. So double standards. And the double standards is crystal clear in Gaza genocide. It is outrageous that this organization has no single word of condemnation of the Gaza atrocities. No single word. In the worst situation currently in the whole world. And the Council of Europe Assembly is avoiding condemning Israel, or even the United States, whose president is disrespecting international law. We are the only one international organization of human rights, rule of law, and democracy, the only one. We have to have all these under our scope, not having double standards. And our group is wondering if this assembly considers Palestinians human beings with the same human rights, since we condemn Georgia, we condemn Azerbaijan, we condemn foreign interference from Russia, etc. But no war, no single word on Israel, no word about the genocide. Dear colleagues, Helsinki's summit concludes with 10 obligations on the member states, and our member states are obliged. And we, the Council of Europe Assembly, represent a human rights organization, not a pro-militarist organization, nor a geopolitical organization, nor a security organization, nor an economical organization. So I beg all of you to just focus on our brothers, sisters, and children who suffer the worst atrocities. We cannot leave them alone. Let's leave aside the double standards. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Laura. Now the floor is for Agnieszka Pomaska. Agnieszka, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The report of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on presidential election in Poland makes one conclusion unmistakably clear. Despite deep political polarization, Polish democracy is vibrant and resilient. First, voter participation. Turnout reached more than 67% in the first round and over 71% in the runoff, among the highest in Europe. This demonstrates that Polish citizens are determined to shape their country's future and will not be discouraged by sharp political rhetoric. Second, resistance to disinformation and foreign interference. Our enemies from the East seek to divide Poland internally, especially on questions of foreign policy. But as we often remind ourselves, the threat is to the East, not to the West. Polish institutions, supported by civil society and diverse media landscape, effectively neutralize these attempts. No credible evidence showed any impact on the outcome. We greatly value the presence of PACE members who observed these democratic processes, strengthening confidence that Poland's elections were free and fair. And it's good to see that also in this assembly, it's clear. We are here among friends who understand where good lies and where evil lies. And last but not least, I wish to express special thanks to Mr. Julian Bulaj, who had the PACE observation mission in Poland, and to his entire team. Your careful monitoring and balanced assessment have helped reinforce public trust in Poland's democratic institutions. Today, we can state with confidence that Polish democracy has passed an important test. In the face of polarization and external propaganda, the people of Poland showed that differences are settled at the ballot box, never through violence or manipulation. This is not a Polish achievement. It is an example for all of Europe of how democratic institutions can remain strong and resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Dear colleagues, as I have said earlier, we will now interrupt the debate to move to the next agenda item. The debate will resume at 4:30. The next item on the agenda is the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize.
10th of May 1990, the President of the Czech and Slovak Federal Republic entered the Assembly Chamber of the Council of Europe. It was an emotional parliamentary assembly that welcomed the former political dissident, the figurehead of the Velvet Revolution, who in 1989 brought an end to the communist regime. In his speech, the philosopher president, an atypical politician, spoke of his years of opposition when dreams took the place of hope.
Nebát snít o zdánlivě nemožném, chceme-li, aby se zdánlivě nemožné stalo skutečností. Bez snění o lepší Evropě nikdy lepší Evropu nevybudujeme.
Following the invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968, which marked the end of the liberalization process of the Prague Spring, Václav Havel remained faithful to his convictions. As chairperson of the Circle of Independent Writers, his commitment led to the banning of his plays. The international community quickly became aware of this dissident. In 1977, Václav Havel co-founded Charter 77, an organization defending human rights in Czechoslovakia. Because of his activities, he was imprisoned on 3 occasions for almost 5 years. In 1989, the crowd spontaneously placed Václav Havel at the head of the Civic Forum, an association uniting opposition movements. He became a key figure in the Velvet Revolution. Almost a quarter of a century later, in March 2013, the prize was launched in Prague to honor what Václav Havel was and what he did. Since then, the prize is awarded each year by the Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly, in partnership with the Václav Havel Library and the Charter 77 Foundation, to reward outstanding civil society action in the defense of human rights. This edition of the prize, the 3 candidates shortlisted are Mzia Amaglobeli, Georgia. Mzia Amaglobeli has been a pioneering Georgian journalist since 2000 and co-founder of the independent media outlets Batu Melebi and Net Gazeti. Despite politically motivated imprisonment and harsh mistreatment following her exposure of abuses during protests, her courageous actions have helped draw attention to media repression and political abuse, aiming to ensure a democratic future for Georgia. Maxim Butkevich, Ukraine. Maxim Butkevich is a Ukrainian journalist, human rights defender, and co-founder of the human rights centers Mina and Hromadsky Radio. Despite his lifelong pacifism, he volunteered for the Ukrainian armed forces at the start of the 2022 Russian invasion and became a platoon commander. Captured and sentenced to 13 years by Russian forces, he endured over 2 years of harsh imprisonment before being released in a prisoner exchange in October 2024. Ulvi Hasanli, Azerbaijan. Ulvi Hasanli is an Azerbaijani journalist and director of the independent media outlet Abzas Media since 2016. He has faced relentless government persecution since 2011, including arbitrary detention, torture, and politically motivated charges. In June 2025, Hasanli was sentenced to 9 years in prison and is currently detained under harsh conditions in a remote prison, where he has endured hunger strikes and solitary confinement. In 1990, Mr. Havel spoke in Strasbourg of the immense strength embodied by the ideals of the Council of Europe. Referring to the organization's emblem, he said that for him, the 12 stars did not express the idea that the Council of Europe would succeed in building a heaven on earth, as there never would be a heaven on earth.
But, in my opinion, these 12 stars are a reminder that the world can become a better place if we have the courage to raise our eyes to the stars.
The Václav Havel Human Rights Prize pays tribute to this distinguished European, and it also pays tribute to all those who, through their determined and tireless work, bring us closer to the ideal of a better world.
Of course, with all these drones and bombings, it's very difficult to look up to the stars. Dear colleagues, I'm very honored to open the award ceremony of the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize, the prize by which we recognize and honor the work of thousands of individuals and organizations who share our values and goals. The protection of fundamental freedoms and human dignity. I would like to first welcome the jury of the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize, who have joined us today. Mrs. Anne Brasser and Mrs. Liliane Maurice-Pasquier, whom you know well, as both have served as presidents of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Mrs. Anne Brasser from 2014 to 2016, and Mrs. Maurice-Pasquier from 2018 to 2020. Mrs. Zuzana Kaputova, former President of the Slovak Republic from 2019 to 2024, who became both the first woman and the youngest person to hold the office. She is known for her background as a lawyer and environmental activist, notably winning the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2016 for her campaign against the toxic landfill. Mr. Tini Cox, President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe from 2022 to 2024, whom you all know well, and Mr. Martin Boyer, who is a professor of medicine specialized in neurology, who served as the Minister of Health of the Czech Republic from 1990 to 1992, and Mr. Giri Priban, a legal scholar, academic, and writer, who was appointed as a Justice of the Constitutional Court of the Czech Republic in 2024. He is renowned for his expertise in sociology of law, legal philosophy, and constitutional theory. His academic work and public engagement have established him as a leading figure in European constitutional law and legal philosophy. On behalf of all these members of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, I would like to thank our partners from the Václav Havel Library, the Charter 77 Foundation, and of course, Her Excellency Ambassador Nazmanova and the government of Czechia for their commitment and contribution, without which the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize could not have come into being. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, you will have noticed that all three shortlisted candidates for the prize this year are journalists. This is not a coincidence. Václav Havel himself believed deeply in the power of words and in the importance of journalism, stating that words can change history and that truthful expression can disrupt oppressive regimes. Recent years and months have been particularly dangerous for journalists, with record numbers of attacks or intimidations on them. As stated by the Assembly, I would like to reiterate that without the right to freedom of expression and free, independent and pluralistic media, there is not true democracy. The Parliamentary Assembly is firmly committed to strengthening media freedom in all its aspects, including the right to access to information, the protection of sources, the protection against searches of professional workplaces and private residences, and the seizure of materials, the safeguarding of editorial independence, and of the ability to investigate, criticize, and contribute to public debate without fear of pressure or interference. The safety of journalists and other media actors is a fundamental component of this freedom. As of 15 March 2025, the Council of Europe Safety of Journalists platform recorded 171 journalists in detention in Europe, including 98 members in member states, or journalists in member states of the Council of Europe. More precisely, at least 26 Ukrainian journalists remain unlawfully detained by the Russian Federation or in temporarily occupied territories, facing fabricated charges, torture, enforced disappearance, and even death. We will have the occasion to discuss it later this week in the plenary with the report of Mrs. Kravchuk and the proposal to establish an annual commemoration day named Victory for Victoria in honor of a 28-year-old Ukrainian journalist, Victoria Rosina, who was tortured and killed after more than a year in Russian custody. Journalists in conflict zones must make significant sacrifices and take life-endangering actions to provide us with reliable information in times of conflict. To all my fellow colleagues journalists who are currently imprisoned, I say, your voice may be silenced, but your testimony is heard loud and clear. This clear focus on journalists during this session is highly symbolic, and it underlines one of the most striking challenges to our shared system of fundamental rights and values, attack on the freedom of speech. In the year when we mark the 75th anniversary of the European Convention on Human Rights, the right to speak up, to tell the truth, is often challenged by the rising populist and authoritarian tendencies that aim to suppress alternative positions and promote blunt propaganda instead. As former US President Barack Obama recently said, reacting to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, it is impossible for us to disagree while abiding by a basic code of how we should engage in public debate, and we must respect other people's right to say things that we profoundly disagree with. This is the basic principle of our democracy and one of the key issues that the new democratic pact that the Secretary General currently develops has to address. Dear colleagues, we recently had the opportunity to follow an event during our meetings in the last session in June about journalists killed in Gaza. We have hundreds of journalists all around the world killed or assassinated. I did a survey, and that is why I have proposed to the jury of the Václav Havel Award to look thoroughly in the dangers that journalism is facing in our days. The results of this survey are showing us that we are living in the last 2 years the most devastating years for journalism. Not even in the Second World War or in the war in Vietnam, so many journalists were killed or detained or jailed. Dear friends, the shortlisted candidates this year for this Václav Havel, as you have seen earlier on the video, are Mzia Maglobeli from Georgia, who has been a pioneering Georgian journalist since 2000 and co-founder of the independent media outlets Batumelebi and Net Gazeti. Amaglobeli, being in jail, is represented today by her lawyer, Mrs. Maya Ntsariashvili. Second nominee, and he is present with us today, is Mr. Maxim Butkevich from Ukraine. Maxim is an Ukrainian journalist, a human rights defender, and co-founder of the Human Rights Center Zmina and Hromadske Radio. Thank you, dear Maxim, for being present today. I know that all candidates would like to be with us today, but they are in jail. They couldn't. The third nominee is Ulvi Hasanli from Azerbaijan. Ulvi Hasanli is an Azerbaijani journalist and director of the independent media outlet Abzas Media since 2016 and is currently, as I said, in jail. Hasanli could not obviously be with us today. Here is therefore represented by Mrs. Gunel Safarova, director of Abzas Media. To all three candidates and their representatives, I would like to say a big thank you. Thank you for showing us the courage to say no to authoritarianism. Thank you for being role models for a whole generation of journalists and human rights defenders. I solemnly ask here in this chamber for the immediate release of Mrs. Amaglobeli and Mr. Hasanli. Governments should show that they are not afraid of the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is alongside the members of the jury, our partners of the Václav Havel Library and Charter 77, and the Secretary General of the Council of Europe that I finally have the immense honor, pleasure, and privilege of announcing the name of the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize Laureate for 2025. The prize is awarded to Mr. Maxim Butkevich, and I want to congratulate you, Maxim, for this. We will go and find, I'll give you first the prize.
dear ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends. 1 year ago, on this very date, I was in Russian captivity in a penal colony on the Ukrainian territory, its part occupied by Russia. I was sentenced by the Russian so-called court on fabricated charges to 13 years of imprisonment of harsh regime. At that time, standing here in the Council of Europe, in the Palace of Europe in Strasbourg, receiving this award, addressing you, would be just a dream. Currently, it is a reality, and it is a great honor to be here today, and even greatest honor to receive this award, which means so much to me and to all of us. In the short list of Václav Havel's Prize this year, I am in the company of two incredibly brave colleagues, Mzia Amaglobeli and Ulvi Hasenli, who defend freedom of speech, freedom of expression, independent thought, and who are subjected to repression by authoritarian regime. And I sincerely hope that they are released as soon as possible. The fact that I'm standing here is also a promise that everyone who is currently in Russian captivity, as well as in jails of authoritarian regimes, will be set free. I dare to say that I participate in this ceremony and I receive this honorable award not only in my personal capacity, but on behalf of Ukrainian prisoners of war and civilians illegally detained by Russia, all those deprived of their liberty, subjected to torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, injured, raped, or imprisoned by Russian occupiers, all my colleagues, fellow journalists who are deprived of their liberty in authoritarian regimes' attempts to silence free media and free speech. I'm often asked if captivity disillusioned me about human rights, that human rights institutions did not prevent or influence my detention, absurd conviction, physical and psychological pressure, or a verdict based upon a confession extracted under duress. I always say no. I am not disillusioned because I have been inside the system that does not value human rights. That means it does not value human dignity, human agency, or the ability of human beings to influence their present and their future. When one is deprived of something, one starts to understand how precious it is. Human rights, one has to face their absence to understand their value. They are not to be taken for granted. Human rights must be valued, treasured, protected, and defended if necessary. My brothers and sisters in arms in Ukraine are doing this right now, including at the front lines, by resisting Russian aggression and the ideology of the Russian world, an ideology that turns human beings into disposable material and puts the authoritarian state first. This is why defense of Ukraine, assistance to Ukraine, and victory of Ukraine will not belong to Ukraine alone. It will belong to all people who value human rights, dignity, and human agency, free speech, free expression, and freedom of media. Ukraine defends not only its territorial integrity, but also fundamental values. Our cooperation, freedom, and desire to live in mutual respect, with dignity and without fear, are based on these values. Using this opportunity, I call upon all of you. Please, do not forget Ukrainian prisoners of war. Do not forget Ukrainian civilians illegally detained by Russia. Ukrainian children illegally kidnapped by Russia. Do not forget all those who fight for freedom and dignity and are repressed and deprived of liberty in Europe or elsewhere. Please remember them, fight for their release, and help us defend the most fundamental things without which we cannot imagine our Europe, our future, nor our very humanity. Thank you. Glory to the heroes, glory to Ukraine.
Mr. President, to wait here, we call you can stand by me. Wait here, stay by me. I would like now to invite, on behalf of Mzia Maglobeli and Ulvi Hassanli, the representatives, to say a few words. Let me first give you the prize.
Mr. President, esteemed members of the Assembly of the Selection Committee, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the floor, first of all. I would like to thank you on behalf of Mzia for including her among nominees of this highly prestigious prize. I would also like to congratulate the other nominee for this prize, Mr. Hassanli, and wish him swift release. I also would like to congratulate the winner of this honorable prize, Mr. Butkevich. To be named among the nominees for the Václav Havel Prize is the greatest honor, an honor for moral courage, for truth, for resilience, but is also a signal, an alarming signal, which means that in my country, in Mzia's country, something is deeply wrong. Today, at the age of 15, Mzia is a prisoner of conscience in her own country. She's also a victim of political persecution. She did not confess to crime that she did not commit. She refused to accept a plea bargain in exchange for freedom. She refused to play the regime's rules, and she never did. Those who orchestrated and carried out Mzia's case tried to reduce her to a symbol of silence and surrender. Instead, she became a voice of defiance. Mzia's fight embodies the very tools that shape a free society: speech, publicity, principled stance, values, equality before the law, respect for the law, but not submission to injustice. Honorable members of this assembly, please note, Mzia remains unlawfully imprisoned, and more precisely, she's a hostage. She has lost nearly her all eyesight. She is able to read only a few pages per day, so she mainly writes. And I would like to read you a short message of Mzia to you. On the path toward freedom and democracy, I rarely thought anything was impossible. Yet it is overwhelmingly emotional to see my name alongside Havel Prize nominees. I have always admired Azerbaijani journalists who stayed in their homeland despite persecution. I deeply respect Ulvi Hassanli's courage. My social media cover still reads, "Be brave like Ukraine." To Maxim Bitkevich, I want to say I sincerely believe in Ukraine's victory. This recognition is not alone mine. I accept it on behalf of my Georgian colleagues, journalists working in critical independent media outlets. In Georgia, being a journalist today means self-sacrifice. My colleagues face harassment, persecution, blackmail, and even physical assault. The one-party parliament of Georgian dream fast-tracked Russian laws, effectively banning freedom of speech, creating grant raising, and partnering with the international organizations with spying and treason, like in Russia. Georgia's government is captured by a regime advancing Russian interests. Today, Georgia holds over 60 political and conscious prisoners from all fields: actors, poets, teachers, comedians, students, and journalists. Yet Georgians continue to fight for a European future for over 300 days because we believe that the EU guarantees all the values of democracy that Georgian citizens stand for. We see ourselves beside you, so do not leave us alone in the face of Russia. Stand with us in the fight for freedom. So this was the short message from Zia's prison cell. As long as her voice is heard in this chamber and in others like this, there is a hope. The hope that prison will not become a place where voices like hers could be silenced. However, dear members of the Parliamentary Assembly, if courtrooms fall silent, if critical and independent media is extinguished, if civil society disappears, and if independent lawyers and human rights defenders no longer exist, and if those who imprisoned Mzia see that the civilized world is no longer watching and distorting justice goes unpunished, then I am afraid the prison will become a place from which no voice will ever reach Europe again. So do not allow this to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Today, Ulvi Hasanli's wife, Rubaba Guliyeva, was meant to be here and deliver the speech, but Azerbaijan authorities have imposed a travel ban that prevents her from leaving the country. So I am, as his colleague, will read her words on her behalf. Ulvi Hasanli is in prison because he believed in truth, in freedom, and in justice for our people. Before the judge gave him 9 years, this June of 2025, he said, "Prison is not despair, prison is not oppression, the struggle continues, truth is with us." These words give me strength every day. Ulvi is not alone. 6 of his colleagues from Abzas Media are also jailed. 3 of them are women. I must say their names with honor. Sevinç Vakif kızı, Nergiz Absalamova, Elnara Kasımova, Hafiz Babalı, Mehmet Kekolov, and also I would like to mention the name of Farid Mehralzadeh, who is a Radio Free Europe contributor and economist, but was arrested in Abzas Media case also, and he also got 9 years. In Azerbaijan today, there are more than 360 political prisoners. Over 25 of them are journalists. They are young men and women who only wanted to tell the truth. The government has closed independent media, but they cannot close the hope in our hearts. I want the world to hear the voices through me. Ulvi and his friends are not forgotten. Their struggle is alive. Ulvi and his colleagues stood with the people when no one else dared to. Today, Ulvi is in prison, but what matters the most is that since November 2023, Ulvi and the journalists I have just named, despite enormous difficulties, have continued to publicize the torture and inhuman treatment inflicted on prisoners in Azerbaijan jail, and for that, exactly, they are facing retaliation again. As his wife, I miss him every day, but I am proud that he chose the truth, proud that he continues to fight, even in prison, and I believe one day soon, our 3-year-old daughter, Suat, and all the children will see their parents free again. Thank you. I would also like to add that not only Abzas Media, but in Azerbaijan, there are several independent media that are closed, which is Meydan TV, Toplum TV, and their corpses are shot and their voices are silenced, but we still have true hope that one day maybe the independent media will live again in Azerbaijan. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. This closes the award ceremony. And the Assembly will hold its next public sitting later today at 4:30 p.m. with the agenda which was approved this morning. The sitting is adjourned.